Now from your strangers here at the all-news station, tonight's news, and please recall we report only news that has not happened. A father told his son a story. There was once a man who decided that all he needed to accomplish that special task of changing his state of awareness was to constantly look at his feet. And sure enough, when he'd do so, his awareness would immediately shift into the state he sought. But a problem quickly became apparent. Almost as soon as he'd remembered to constantly look at his feet, and the shift in awareness took place, he'd start to think about the whole affair, how successful and simple it was, how often he forgot about it, how delighted he was to have discovered it, and so forth. And in so doing, would cease looking at his feet and lose the new state. With that, the father appeared to have ended the tale. And after a bit of silence between them, the lad said, "You do know that you told me basically that same story several hundred times already in various garb. So why is this one any different? What's new with it? And why do you keep repeating it to me anyway?" And the old man responded by taking a bus schedule from his pocket, which he began to thumb through while muttering just loud enough to be heard, "You know, I've never gotten around to actually going anywhere. Let's see now. A certain man recently seemed unable to not pose this question to himself. Is there any chance that the so-called state of sleep, from which mystics believe they suffer and against which they struggle, is caused not by a faulty use of the mind, as they maintain, but rather by a faulty understanding of the mind's purpose?" After proposing this possibility, he fell silent for a bit as he considered it, then said, "Boy, if so, wouldn't the joke be on them?" Poem. Oh, you can't fall down without the mind, and you can't get up without the mind. You know, under these circumstances, thinking of your getting back up as progress somehow doesn't smell prosaically kosher and FDA approved. One man had what he considered to be a bad habit, which he couldn't seem to give up, but he would feel momentarily better each time he'd remember his desire to do so. There was once a man who lived far up in the mountains who supposedly knew the secret. And when anyone would come to him asking how they too could learn the same, he would tell them, "Go off and sit silently among the trees and do nothing but think about thinking. And after 20 or 30 years, if it doesn't all become perfectly clear, then I will invite you to be my guest and push me off a cliff and talk bad about my mama." Homeowner's tip. If you want to rearrange your furniture, there are two ways to approach it. One is poetic, theoretical, metaphorical even. And the other is just to move the stuff around and be done with it. While but a child, one man's parents gave him a radio, which played all of the time. When young, he hardly even noticed it, but later in life, its continual noise began to bother him greatly. But no matter what he tried, he could find no way to permanently shut it off. Damn, what a sad story. And now for a listener's response to this story. Quoting, "I find the man that you just reported on, who had a radio always playing that he couldn't turn off, to be a dunce. No one could be that stupid. There had to be something he could have done to shut it off. Geez, I can't believe how dumb some people can be. Can't you find more intelligent and inspiring men to talk about? Surely there are a few people out there not too big an idiot to locate their own nose or tie their own shoes. Come on now, don't keep telling us about just these few imbeciles. Well, I have to stop here. Ran out of paper. Yours, a thoughtful viewer. Pointing to an article in the newspaper, a man said to his basset hound, "Well, Winfro, here's something new to think about." And the dog's impression was, "I can't see that you need anything additional to think about." No. Bet you can't eat just one. It's a bit late to come up with that now. That was a conversation between two people. Was it me playing both parts that threw you? Headline, a story concerning the constant pressure of space. A man said to a mystic, "How are you doing these days?" And the mystic replied, "Better when there are no days." The man later asked what space had to do with the story, obviously having missed the point. Had there been one? There was once a man who had a motto. I don't want to be too specific. Whose ultimate success living thereby ultimately rendered him unseen. A father advised a son, "If you are going to indulge in thinking, take up wrestling." To which the lad responded, "Judo, you mean?" "Yeah, that too. Why not?" Question, what is the average man's error rate in his judgments of life? Answer, 100%, of course. What did you think it was? The speaker for the day addressed the crowd thusly: "Those who undertake a study of their mind and pursuant to such attempt to bring same under their control are like men who proclaim that they will leap from the tops of their ankles and soar away into the heavens." And a voice from the crowd called out, "That's ridiculous. Who in their right mind would attempt such a thing?" And the speaker feigned shock at the words, responding, "Who said anything about people in their right minds?" At which point, both he and the crowd had a good laugh over the obvious joke. Well, that's what the station manager told me to conclude the story with, to take into account the sensibilities of some of our viewers. Though I'm sure not you. Long have men promoted the idea, accepted as meritorious and commendable, of the perfectibility of human existence, which in truth would be the realization of no flaws existent. Or, as the chief of police said as one of his patrolmen drove a car across his foot, "My cop runneth over." A certain man so pondered, "Is it truly correct to say that we think too much when we have no choice, since the brain never ceases to think? Is the intent of the comment to actually say that we think too much to no profitable end? Or perhaps that what we normally call thinking would be more accurately identified by some other name or description? Who knows? Certainly not thought. Far ago and long away was once a school dedicated to the struggle to achieve enlightenment, which called itself by the name, Don't Waste Your Time. And, I might add, was the astounding success of its day. Have you yet to notice that you can get by telling the same setup to a joke over and over again as long as you continually change the punchline. And what is even more scrumptious is that the same is true vice versa. One eternal, immutable punchline repeating itself time and time again right before men's eyes, and they, forever oblivious to the fact, through being constantly distracted by meaningless apparent shifts in the setups. One man privately designed this get well, or at least better, card. Without the mind, there are no problems. Without the mind, there are no questions. Without the mind, there are no fears. Without the mind, there are no regrets. And without the mind, there is no me to be asleep or to awaken. What else the hell do you need to know, damn it? Have a nice day. Have a nice or at least tolerable day. End of card. Headline: Decision Time. The actual difference between a mystic and ordinary people is this. Ordinary people have one state of consciousness while mystics have two. The ordinary state, which everyone has, and another one, in which they find grave fault with the ordinary one. So that's it for that bit of news, is it? So where's the notion of it being decision time come in? Tell me that. And now for some important news regarding what this is all about. Those who have to ask what this is all about will never understand what this is all about. There was once a man with a home, which he'd sometimes leave. And when he had returned, he had the impression that when he had been gone, he'd been another person. My God, what could you say to such a deluded man? If you could catch him. After a certain mystic had admitted that he liked music and someone asked him what kind, he replied, the kind that is outside. And as everyone who heard him cut their eyes about in an attempt to see what or where he was referring to, he did not, and was not surprised that they, misunderstanding him, did. There was once a man named Bob, whose life revolved around the slogan, "Help me, God." A deity, it turned out, whose own motto was, "Help me, Bob." Those most captive of the illusion of having a self are always those most impressed by themselves. How one man now saves money previously spent on gossip magazines. Explains he. Once you know your life story, you know everyone's life story. At the briefing each morning, before the humans were sent out on the streets, local conditions would always conclude his comments by saying to them, "Okay, let's do it, but remember, it's a strange universe out there, and by you believing it is, you help make it so. Now let's get out there." The distinction between thought and all descriptions of life and the clear, silent, direct perception of it is that the former is so piddling, mediocre, and shabby. While visiting a mystical lodge, a man asked the headmaster, "What are your beliefs?" At which the mystic became miffed, feeling insulted that he was taken to be dead. Fable for the day. Before man came along, no one had any questions. And now that he is here, with all of his damn questions, no one has any answers. Thanks, man. And a listener reacted to this tale thusly. In that it had no animal characters or any clear moral, I believe you are unjustified in calling this a fable. Yeah. Thanks, listener. The oft expressed idea in the mystical literature that I will not have achieved supreme enlightenment until all men are enlightened is in truth a noting that you are not fully enlightened until everyone seems to you to be enlightened, which is to say that you no longer have any complaint with any man, and that everyone seems to you to be fully realized, without flaws, and lacking nothing. Neat, huh? Okay, how do you explain this? There once existed two equally valid schools devoted to activities such as this, who had two quite apparently conflicting names to describe their approaches. One was called Be Quiet, and the other was known as Make Your Talking to Yourself Profitable. How do you explain this? One chap's query: what is thought but the ongoing attempt to give to some otherwise meaningless brain activity the appearance of significance? Do you want to answer him? One man altered an old habit, to wit, one day when he again chastised himself with the words, I've got to do better, he responded, then who? Then said, you know who? And responded, no, I don't. Then insisted, but you must. And responded again, but I don't. So tell me, do better than who? And ultimately, at that point, found himself at a loss for an answer. He later asked me to ask you if you had one. The boogaboo power of the illusion of a self is not simply in the illusion itself, but in its ability to produce a picture of itself in duplicate. Until you have a stable comprehension of the fact that all thought is meaningless, you will be much troubled by thought. There was once a man who undertook the study of an extraordinary subject. He began with text consisting of thousands of pages, then moved to some merely in the hundreds. Then later narrowed down his inquiries to ideas that could be expressed on but a single page, then in a paragraph, then in a sentence, and finally even less than that. And even though he had initially been a true lover of books, and still understood why, he ultimately found himself allergic to, even made sick by, ideas outside of himself. On one world appeared a certain phenomenon which, in some circles, was accepted as being of supreme importance. Only thing was, these circles were made up entirely of the phenomenon itself. Once upon a time, a mirror looked at itself and asked, do I look familiar to you? Right after his daily lecture, the head of a mystical school said to one of the young monks, you remain far from enlightenment if you still find talk about it interesting. And after a perplexed pause, the monk replied, but that can't be true. And the mystic said, if it makes sense to you, it can. And for thousands of years afterwards, whenever particularly perceptive men would hear this story told, to a man, their immediate and common reaction would be, damn. And now, just for fun, a final little quiz game for the people here today. Question: what is the worst thought you can ever have? Answer: that it is you having the thought. Okay, what's an even worse thought to have? Answer: that it is you wanting to awaken. So how'd you like it? And everyone said, damn. Don't you just love it? You'll take care and just mark it.